Hi guys, welcome back. So in our previous video we imported our concept image into Maya. So let's start modeling from this lesson onwards. So as you can see in our concept image we have a base or a ground, something like that you can call. So first we will be start creating the base. So after that it will be much easier for us to create the rest of the models and will be able to arrange everything properly. So that's the reason we are actually creating the base first. So we are going to create that order. The first thing is, here we have some shelves. These are called shelves, and each of the shelves have different tools for each of different processes. Like for curve modeling and surface modeling we have tools for that, and polygon modeling we have polygon model tools, and after that sculpting, rigging, animation, and so on and so forth. So the main thing we will be focusing on is poly modeling, since we are actually creating polygonal models. So the first thing we are going to do is we are going to use poly cylinder in order to create our base. So the first thing is we'll just press space on the keyboard. So we will be having all the views. Here we have top view and a front view, side view, and as well as perspective view. So here first we will select the poly cylinder, and once you selected that, in the top view you can click on the sender and then you can just scale and create. Now while you create you can see the preview of that model in all the views, and once you are satisfied with how big you want the model, or if you want something similar to our concept image itself, once you are okay with the size, then you can just release. After that you can come to side view or front view, and you can just click and move up. That means now we are actually adding how length or height you want that model to be. So once you are satisfied with that, you can just release. Now we actually created our cylinder model. Once that is done, you can just select the perspective view and you can press space. So we will be now opening only the perspective view. Once you completed that, as you can see in our channel box we have a separate option called input, and input we have a poly cylinder. If you click on that poly cylinder option, now you have some extra details like a radius, like how much radius you want for that cylinder. After that, height. So that means you can actually always edit radius, height, and each of these values even after you create the model. So after that we have something called subdivision axis, and as you can see in our cylinder itself we have some subdivisions, and you can actually increase this subdivision to make it more smooth and make it more round, and you can reduce it. And one thing you always have to remember is, when you add too much of polygons, the model will get really slow. The viewport will be slow, and the final rendering time for each of that polygon it will be much more. So you always have to keep that in mind. So you only have to add the enough polygons. For example, here even if I have to keep 20 subdivisions, it will be a circle, and even if I reduce it to maybe something like 12 or 13 also, it will still be a circle. That means we can always manage with the 12 polygons. So remaining 8 subdivisions it will be too much, and so we can reduce the render time also. So that thing you always have to remember. So for now we are actually keeping it at 12. After that we have subdivision height. So that is now we are actually added subdivision axis. Now if you want to add heights, you can add height, since we are actually not needing any subdivision in the height value, so we are actually keeping it at 1 only. After that we have something called subdivision caps. Okay, I'm adding 5 subdivision caps. The reason is, Now the entire model is really flat, like there is no depth or nothing like that. So we want to make it more like a realistic ground or a floor, something like that. So in order to make it more realistic, we need extra subdivisions. That's the reason I'm adding 5 caps. So after that is done, now what we are actually going to do is we are going to edit the components of this polygonal model. So it will be much easier for us to make some edits and make it more like more realistic, and we'll be able to change how these polygons are arranged or anything, and we'll be able to create a much different model or something that we actually really want. So the next thing is, in a polygon model we have 3 different components. Each of these we are actually going to look at next. So once you click the polygon, and if you right click, you will be seeing a lot of extra options. Here we have something called face, vertex, edge. These are the components of a polygonal object. First we'll look at face. So once you selected face, you will be able to select any of the faces on a polygon model. A face is actually created with a minimum 3 sides, means 3 sides will be there for a like a triangle. You will have both left and right, and one bottom side also. That's how a minimum polygon will have a triangle, and a maximum it will depend on how many edges that particular face will have. So for example, here we have a triangle face. After that everything is a rectangle or have 4 sides. So this is one of the component. So once you selected a particular face, you can actually select a face, and you can use either one of the tools, like a move tool. You can use move tool to move that particular face. You can use the rotate tool to rotate the face, and you can use the scale tool to scale the face also. So these are the face component. The next one is, if you right click and go and select edges of a face. Same thing, you can select a particular edge and you can move it any direction. You can rotate it, you can scale it, and you can make your edits there also. The third and the final one is vertex. Vertex is points that is connecting each of the edges. So the beginning box is the vertex. Each of this vertex will create an edge, and each of that edges will create a face, and a group of that faces will create a polygonal object. And one more thing is, if you want to see all the faces in a particular model, you can just select a vertex face. So you will be able to isolate and see all the polygons, all the faces in a particular polygonal object. So it's actually not there for editing or anything like that, just to see how many polygons, how many faces that particular polygonal object have. Okay, so after that the same thing, you can actually edit a polygon. You can edit a vertex, you can move it any direction you want, and you will be able to create edits using the vertex. And if you select a multiple vertex, then you will be able to rotate the vertex, and you will be able to scale the vertex. Okay, so those are the components of a polygonal object. So the next thing is, we are going to edit these 3 components and make some changes in our base model. So the next thing is, we are going to select the edge component, and if you double click on a particular edge, here we have caps. If I double click on this particular edge, the entire loop will be selected. Once that is done, you can select the scale tool, and you can scale it on that path itself. Okay, so we'll just scale it and move it closer to that final edge. After that we'll just leave it. We will repeat the second one, same, and the third one. So we will keep an equal distance between each of these caps. Once that is done, the next thing is we are going to use a separate tool called extrude. Extrude tool is one of the important tools in polygon model. So for example, here I have a cylinder model, completed cylinder model. So if I want to create an extra object from this model, we'll not be able to, either we have to create a separate model. For example, if I select the face and if I move it, I am not creating a new shape. Instead, I'm just moving that particular component. So instead of that, if you want to create a separate model, either you have to create a separate polygonal object like a cylinder or sphere or something like that, or you have to use the extrude tool. So extrude tool is for that single purpose only. You can select a component and you can use the tool and you will be able to create an extra object from the selected component. Okay, so here we are going to select the face component and we are going to select each of these faces. So once you selected a particular face, you can press shift on the keyboard and you can double click the next face in the same loop. For example, here this face is actually in this particular group. So after I select this face, I can press shift on the keyboard and I can double click the next one. So it will select everything in the loop. Same thing will repeat for the next one and we'll do the same thing. And finally, when it comes to the center part, we will not be able to do it since we are actually not in a complete loop. It's in the center of that polygonal object. So we'll have to individually click on each of the faces while holding shift. So we'll be able to select everything. So now we actually selected all the face component. And next thing is we are going to press shift, right click. First you press shift on the keyboard, then right click on the mouse. After that you will be given a lot of options, extra tools here. Here you can select the extrude face option. Once you selected the extrude face, a different tool will be available with the extrude face options also. Here in the same tool you can see you have move tool, then you have scale tool, and then you have rotate tool. So that means you can actually now move this particular face and you will be able to create a separate object. At the same time, you can scale that face in any direction. You will be able to create a separate edit. Same thing, you can actually rotate that face and you will be able to create a separate edit. For now we just want to move, so we will just click on the move y axis and instead of moving up we'll just move it down slightly little bit. So now we actually selected all the component and we created a depth inside that particular cylinder model. So once that is done, you can just select right click and select object mode. So we will go back to that selecting only the object mode. So now we actually created the edit and now we actually have our base. Okay, the next thing is now we are actually going to make some edits in our final polygon shape for our base, so we will be able to finish up the model. So the next thing is, now even after making this shape, we can see our floor is like completely flat, more like a rounded shape. So for that I will just arrange this caps in a rounded manner, so it will be much more interesting, much more realistic. So the first thing we are going to do is we are going to double click on this loop and you can select move tool by pressing W on the keyboard and you can just move it a little bit up. and we will do the same thing to the next one. This time, instead of keeping it the same level, we are going to move it little bit more on the y-axis, and we will continue until all the edges are moved. And finally we will select the vertex and we'll select the center point and we'll just move it up also. So now we actually have our floor model, and we have a more like a curved smooth version of our flat or floor. Okay, the next thing is you can press 3 on the keyboard, number 3 on the keyboard, to see the final smoothed version of our model. So this is our final version of our floor model. Okay, so this is our final floor model, and in the next video we'll be start creating our rest of our models. So I'll see you guys in the next video.